And if this is your first time giving your mind a little love, I have a few goodies for you. First, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And second, sign up for the Morning Mind Love. Think of it like a weekday oracle from your highest self to help you start each day with a positive focus. Plus, you'll get 2 gifts absolutely free: a 30-minute binaural meditation and 30 days of journaling prompts to help you remember who you truly are. So join over 9,000 people and go to mindlove.com to sign up. Welcome to Mind Love, episode 332. Today's episode is all about unlocking the powers of your ADHD brain, adult strategies for focus, motivation, and emotional regulation.
There's this thing with ADHD called rejection sensitivity. I didn't actually know about it at first either. And when I first heard about it, it was like a light bulb, like, oh, this makes so much sense. And Dr. William Dodson, he's like one of the leading people in the ADHD world. I think I mentioned him already because he pushed the interest-based nervous system idea. So he's kind of coined this idea, rejection-sensitive dysphoria. It describes the idea of, because we have kind of emotional dysregulation, because the way neurochemicals kind of work for people with ADHD differently, our emotional dysregulation is all sort of like out of whack. And so a lot of times we'll experience things really extremely.
Turn up your frequency with Mind Love. Bite-sized brain hacks for seekers, dreamers, and doers. It's time to give your mind a little love with your host, Melissa Monti.
If this is your first time giving your mind a little love, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Mind love is a habit, and the more you give your mind that love and intention, the better you'll feel about yourself and your life. Plus, it's really a win-win because more subscribers means Mind Love attracts even more amazing guests to bring you their wisdom. So don't forget to subscribe. If you believe yourself to have ADHD, get ready for a snack because I feel like the pacing of this episode alone is going to titillate all those dopamine receptors that keep that beautiful brain of yours going. I have ADHD, and it's taken me decades with this diagnosis to not only truly understand my brain, but also to make peace with it. Screw that. I didn't make peace. I actually celebrate this brain. I love this brain. It is so rare that I'm truly frustrated with my brain because I know that the upsides far outweigh the downsides. Think about it. Your brain isn't typical. It's distinct. What a gift. You're a natural at thinking differently. Do you know how much corporations invest to find out-of-the-box thinkers? Spoiler, lots. The problem is, or shall I say the perceived problem is, we might struggle with conventional expectations like punctuality, stillness, silence, rigid structures, or conformity. Somehow, employers want us to think outside the box while fitting in one. I'm going to start with a little life hack, even before diving into the heart of this episode. Perception is shaped by presentation. It's marketing 101. It's even propaganda 101. Influence people's thoughts by directing their perception. You tell people what to think, and they often will. Somehow, my resourceful teenage self understood this even better than I do now. And maybe it's because my ADHD brain is a little more free-spirited, less inhibition or impulse control. Or it might be because I started doing this before I truly learned to hold back. Regardless, I thought, if I have to have ADHD, I'm going to make it work for me. So I went to disabled student services at school and got some adjustments. No grades based on attendance, no time limits on tests. I even got priority registration, which was honestly the ultimate college hack. In my first corporate job, I went to HR. After that little visit, I was no longer required to be punctual. I was able to start work later than everyone else, and I even got a corner office when everyone else had cubicles. I am not saying that this is a lesson on how to be liked in the workplace, but there is something to say about owning your needs. And given that I became one of the top salespeople in my district, any annoyance from people who actually mattered faded pretty quickly. Well, these experiences taught me to love my ADHD. It's not just a condition, it's an edge, a unique advantage in many ways. And because I addressed the challenges, I found fewer reasons to be hard on myself, and I can focus on the many, many, many superpowers that come with my unique brain. Well, now that we've set the stage, I am so excited to share this interview. It's my favorite discussion on ADHD so far, and I have learned things that I didn't pick up in my last 20 years of understanding and harnessing my mind. This is going to be fast-paced, full of tips and tricks to manage your brain and to access its superpower. And our guest is Jesse Anderson. He's the author of Extra Focus, the quick start guide to adult ADHD. He's a writer, speaker, coach, ADHD advocate, and maker of things. Diagnosed at 36, Jesse writes about his insights and experiences living with ADHD in the weekly newsletter Extra Focus, which helps over 60,000 readers navigate their own ADHD journeys and better understand their loved ones. He's also known for his humorous, relatable, and insightful posts about ADHD on all of the social medias. So 3 key things we will learn are the surprising connection between rejection sensitivity and intense emotional reactions in people with ADHD, the secret to ADHD motivation and momentum, and how AI voice tools can help you organize your thoughts and help you tackle challenging tasks. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Can we talk about how overwhelming wellness advice has become? Cold plunges, gratitude journals, screen detoxes, morning routines. It just feels like there's advice for everything these days. But how do you know what actually works for you? I've been down that rabbit hole, trying every new trend, buying every new course, following every guru, and it is exhausting. And honestly, a lot of it just added more noise to my life. With all the information overload about mental health and wellness, it can be a real struggle to know what's true and what actions to take. That's where talking to actual professionals comes in. Therapy helps you cut through all that noise and figure out what you actually need, not what some influencer is selling, but what works for your specific situation. It can teach you how to set boundaries, trust your own judgment, and be the best version of yourself. BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform with over 30,000 therapists. They have a rating of 4.9 from 1.7 million reviews, and you can join a session at the click of a button and switch therapists anytime if it's not the right fit. Instead of drowning in generic advice, you get personalized recommendations from someone who actually knows what they're talking about. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Talk it out with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/mindlove. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/mindlove. Can we talk about back to school chaos for a second? The kids are getting back into routines, everyone's schedules are crazy, and suddenly you're supposed to have dinner on the table every night like some kind of magician. But want to know what I figured out? Shopping, planning, and cooking food really can be simple and stress-free, which is why I love Hungry Root. Hungry Root takes the stress out of mealtime by filling your cart with personalized picks and planning your week of meals, getting smarter with every order. With over 15,000 recipes to choose from each week, many ready in just 15 minutes or less, it's a huge lifesaver on those busy weeknights. I personally love their Smart Cart technology. It learns what I actually like and then recommends groceries, recipes, and supplements tailored to my tastes and needs. Plus, I love the kids' snack section where I get these really easy snacks to just keep in the car or throw in our to-go bags or lunch boxes for those of you who need them. They screen out over 200 additives, including high fructose corn syrup and artificial sweeteners. They only source high-quality meat and seafood with no hormones or antibiotics, and they carry trusted brands like Oatly and Vital Farms. The time that I have gotten back has been incredible. Take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/mindlove and use code MINDLOVE. That's hungryroot.com/mindlove, code MINDLOVE to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/mindlove, code MINDLOVE. And now let's welcome Jesse Anderson to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's fun to be here.
So you discovered that you had ADHD when you were 36. Tell me about that whole experience, because so many people are diagnosed younger. And I also want to know how that then led you to being a pro at it enough to write a book.
Yeah, so I mean, now that I know a lot more about ADHD, I'm kind of surprised I was never diagnosed earlier. Like it just seems so obvious kind of looking back and seeing teachers saying the exact same things in every report card. Because I was like, I would do really good at tests, but I never did homework. I just struggled to do any homework. I never turned in homework on time. And so teachers would always say, like, he's got really great potential, but is always late or disruptive in class, or like just doesn't do his homework. Like that was a big thing. So it's kind of surprising looking back now. But yeah, so I didn't get diagnosed until I was 36. And that happened after a really good friend of mine, he got diagnosed. And then his wife and my wife were really good friends, and they started talking. And so my wife came back to me and she's like, I've been hearing more and more about some of these, some of the things about ADHD, and you just might want to take a look at it. And at the time I was very much like, no way. Like I thought I knew what ADHD was, and that wasn't me. Like I was never the kid that was like running in circles in class and stuff like that. So, and I also was like, I have no problem focusing on things that are interesting to me. And so to me, not knowing much about ADHD, I thought that meant that I couldn't have ADHD, because in my mind, someone with ADHD can't focus on anything at all. But that's not the case. When you're interested, you can hyper focus for hours and hours and hours when it's something that, that like tickles your brain and you find interesting. So that was sort of how the process got started. She told me to look into it. And as I started to read and kind of read stories of other people that had it, I was realizing, oh man, this really explains most of my life. Like so many of these things that I thought were like just me or like just my family. There was a lot of these different things that I thought were just sort of like family quirks because my dad acts this way and my brother acts this way. And so do I. So it's just sort of like within, it's just an Anderson thing. But it just turns out we all have, the Andersons, we've all got ADHD. So that was kind of how that got started. And I looked into it more and more, and things just kept piling up of like, oh, this explains why I struggle so much with time and why I'm late to things all the time and why I struggle with motivation. Some of my difficulties with like managing emotions, where it's like, I'll get angry just on a flip of a dime. If I feel rejected, it's like 0 to 100 instantly. And just all those things continued to add up. And so I looked into it more, and I found a counselor who was eventually able to diagnose me. And that was kind of how my journey got started. And that was about, like 6 or 7 years ago now. And then I've just been like basically diving in since then, becoming kind of a student of my own brain. Because once I learned like this explains so much about my life, I was like, I want to know more. I want to know more, and really sort of like dive into like, what can I do now that I know about this? Like how does this change my perspective and the way that I do things going forward from here?
I was told quite often when I was growing up, like, oh, she may have ADHD, but you know how we hyperfocus? I loved to learn, and I was really competitive with my classmates. Like I wanted to be top of my class. And so that just triggered the hyperfocusing with all of my classes. And I was really good at the first word that just came to my mind was being manipulative. but what I mean by that is I knew from a young age how to convince people of things. Like I remember asking my teacher in 3rd grade, I'm like, can you just give me all of the homework for this month so that I can just do it while you're talking? Because I'm having a really difficult time just sitting here listening to you, and I'm going to end up doing something else. Or you can just give me the work and you can see, are my grades good enough? And I was doing this in like 3rd grade, probably not in the best words, but my 5th grade teacher just like harnessed it immediately. And so I would get all of the work done for the month, the first of the month, and then just do whatever else I wanted to. And I was like tutoring the 5th graders when I was in 4th grade and things like that. But that was my strategy, was just asking, hey, I'm going to be doing other stuff while you're talking in class, but if you give me the work, it'll be work related. So that
Right.
worked for me really well. But that also led to me, I wasn't medicated at a young age. I did convince doctors to give me the medication when I was in college. It ended up being very tied to a lot of the different things, weight loss, all the things that I'm like, okay, well now I'll get on the medication. But I look at that now as sort of a downfall, because now I live very holistically. I eventually got off of that medication. For me, it felt like it was stealing my soul. Like it took away my playfulness, and I would get really snappy when I was coming down from it. At the end of the day, I became very dependent on it. And now I kind of manage it holistically. And so it's like I'm learning everything from scratch, because it went from like, okay, this is how I survive school, which the rest of life is nothing like school. This is how I survived my 20s, heavily medicated. And now, how do I survive my 30s when I have ambitions and goals? And so, even just looking at your strategies, there's so many that I just kind of naturally use. And we're going to get into a bunch of them. But like the novel environments, the fact that I'll spend so much time perfecting a to do system and then want nothing to do with it and have to move to a whole nother one. So now I don't spend quite as much time, because I'm like, this is going to get me through the next 4 months, and then I'm going to need to find something else.
Totally.
But you talk about how there are ways that neurotypical brains are structured for motivation. I don't like the word neurotypical, because I swear I know more people that are ADHD brained than the ones that are supposedly neurotypical. They're like 10% of the people in my life. But those neurotypical motivators are importance, rewards, and consequences. But it's different for people with ADHD. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, first, I want to mention real quick, I did very much the same thing where I felt like I was trying to find what's the cheat code for whatever this situation is, if it's a job or it's a class. Like, how am I going to like hack this to work with my brain? Because the normal way ain't going to work. Like, I know that from from the set, like it's not going to work doing it how I'm supposed to do it. So I kind of have to figure out some way to trick myself to get through it. And I had a math teacher who really noticed that in me. And that was like sort of like that first time where I'm like, oh, I am pretty smart. I can tackle some of these challenges if I approach it from a new perspective. And she did sort of like what you were saying, like gave me kind of front loaded some of the work so that I could get through it quickly, because that's how my brain worked. And then she gave me like challenging problems to work on instead. So that, yeah, totally relate with all of that you were talking about. As for, so the neurotypical people, or whatever you want to say, most people I think are motivated by, like you said, that importance and rewards and consequences. And like, because of that, most of the productivity stuff you look at is based around those. It's like, how do you rank these by importance? And then how can you give yourself little rewards by completing these, or give consequences if you don't? And that just doesn't really work for most people with ADHD, or at least not primarily. It's like very, very, very low on the scale of what's going to.
It's like on a Tuesday afternoon, it might work, but
right, exactly. So for people with ADHD, we're kind of Dr. William Dodson calls it the interest-based nervous system. And I kind of break it down and call it just like the 4 C's of motivation. And those are captivate, create, compete, and complete. And just to go through those like pretty quickly. So captivate is things that are interesting. Like when I'm doing a new hobby that I'm loving, there's no difficulty being motivated to do that hobby. Like I am in it. I am interested, and it just grabs me and pulls me in. The second one, same with the second one, which is create. And so captivate, create is about creativity and novelty. So when like brainstorming a new business idea, or like creating something new, or if you're like in some sort of like artistic way of doing it, or like music, like those are another area where it's really easy to kind of like find the motivation to do those things. Like those are fun. Those are fun to our brain. And so it's really easy to get moving in those ways. The third one is compete. And that's you kind of talked about that a little bit with school, like kind of finding like the challenge and taking it on. I would always like kind of like Goodwill Hunting, like a teacher would mention like a really difficult problem. And that's all I wanted to do now is solve, like, how do I solve that problem that the teacher said was like, no one solved it for 3 semesters or whatever. That's like, that's what I'm going to do now. And then the fourth one is complete. And that's all about like deadlines, due dates, that urgency. Again, like with the school analogies, but like when you had the school paper and it's like, you got 3 months to work on this, I'm ignoring it for 2 months and 29 days. And then like that night before, suddenly that urgency shows up and I get all that motivation, energy. And that's when I can like tackle that big project. So yeah, captivate, create, compete, complete. Those are like the 4 C's of motivation that I think are the primary factors that motivate most people with ADHD. And when you know about those, you can really sort of see kind of like what you were saying, like you've collected strategies over the years. And a lot of times these really kind of line up with strategies you've used in the past. Like, especially, I know so many times if I like, how do I get this done? Oh, I use a strategy that makes it urgent. Somehow it like injects urgency into that situation to make it something that's going to entertain my brain enough that I'm actually going to be able to get it done.
Yeah, when my husband and I, back when we were broke and first starting to build businesses, we lived in New York in this little tiny bedroom, a little bit bigger than a queen size bed, and we shared this apartment in a really awesome location though, with like 4 other people, and we had such small space. And my husband, actually such a good husband, he was like, you're gonna need nooks if you're gonna get anything done. So he like built a platform, like we built a loft where our bed was, and then put this little length out to have a little sitting nook for me to like get work done, with a desk underneath. Like I had 3 spots in this tiny little room just so I could have some sort of novelty.
Oh man,
But
I love a good nook for getting some work done. That's awesome.
I know you needed a whole section in your book just called nooks, because nooks are such a big part of my life. But we talked a little bit about hyperfocusing, and this is what got me through school, was that I just happened to love learning. And so it wasn't until later on, when I was forced to take classes that I wasn't interested in, or have a job that I wasn't quite interested in, that I started really realizing the downsides of ADHD, because it just sort of, I fit really well in the high school and down environment. And so tell me about hyperfocus, and how is that different from flow state, that we're going to call them boring brains, because they always get the good terms that the
Nice.
neurotypical brains have.
Yeah, so flow state is like they on the surface sound really similar. Like the whole idea is like things are sort of like grooving in your brain, and you're just like kind of aligned and moving forward and getting stuff done. For me, I think the dividing line that I put is like with flow, you feel like this is awesome. I hope it keeps going. Like I want to keep this energy alive. And with hyperfocus, it feels like almost like compulsion. Like it almost feels like if I stop this, I'll never be able to capture this feeling, this again, this energy again. And so I feel like
It feels like you're on meth.
keep doing it. Yeah, there almost is like some sort of like, it feels like some sort of like, yeah, like drug driving you or something. Cause you're just like, I got to keep doing this thing or I'm going to lose this energy. And so I want to keep going, which is why like, you lose track of like, have I had anything to drink? No idea. Do I need to go to the bathroom? I don't know. I'm completely blocking out all those signals. And so I just have no idea anything else going on other than that thing that I'm hyper focused on. And it's definitely, I think it's definitely a good thing at times. Like it can, like, I don't know that you can control it so much, but sometimes you're hyper focused on something beneficial and you get a lot of work done really fast, which is cool. But other times you're hyper focused on something, and then like 6 hours later, you look back, you're like, why did I do that? That was not worth the time I put into it.
That was the downside of Adderall for me, that I started to realize there's certain times where I really thought it was a superpower. Like I said, it was tied into a lot of things for me. I ended up having an eating disorder, and just, I don't know, women growing up in the 90s with like the low-rise jeans and the anorexic singers on TV. We had a lot that was going on. And so, yeah, I was obsessed with Adderall. Like it was definitely an addiction, and it was so hard to get sometimes. Like you had to actually go to different pharmacies, and there was almost always a shortage, and they wouldn't tell you over the phone if they had it. And then I'd get there and they'd be like, yeah, we don't have it. I'm like, why couldn't you just tell me this over the phone? I'm sitting in LA traffic, going to 12 different places, yelling at pharmacists, total like drug addict behavior. But when I was on it, there were times where like, if I wasn't in the right space, like I had all these tricks where I'm like, okay, I need to have my task open when I take it and when it kicks in, so that I focus on that. Otherwise, all of a sudden I'm going down this like, oh, now I have 19 tabs open on different to-do apps, or like how to do this process. And I never actually do the task because I'm so focused on the process. And that happens still a little bit with hyper-focusing, but it's like it was a for sure thing with Adderall almost every single time. And then I'd be like, okay, well, maybe I need to take it 3 minutes before I open the window. Like I was trying to hag it in this weird way. And I don't really think it could do that. And it was getting more erratic the longer I was on it, less helpful. I don't know what my point of this was, but
yeah, I mean, I'll say from my own perspective, like first, like I'm not a doctor or anything like that. So I have no, like, this is not medical advice or anything. My own experience with ADHD medication is I have not found one that worked for me. I've tried several. I do have friends that it's been super beneficial for them. So I'm not like anti-med. Like if you find the right dosage, I know like some people have found it to be really helpful. For me, I have not found. I went through a doctor and we tried I think like 7 different medications, and I like one just made me mad all the time. Like I took it and like 3 days in, I told my wife, I was like, I think I'm going to stop taking this one. And she's like, yes, please stop taking that one. You're just like, I just had like a short fuse about just like everything was annoying when I was on that one, which is kind of weird. And then a lot of them for me, just like, it was just like a sugar pill. Like I didn't notice any difference at all. And I know it's so different from person to person because like a dosage that I take I might not feel anything, whereas someone else could take like 10% of that dose. And then that really like helps give them that extra, whatever it is, to kind of get through their day. But it's so different for different people. And yeah, it's kind of this weird world to navigate because there's also kind of like what you said, when I was trying different medications and I was like going to like, it felt like a drug deal or something. And it felt like so hard. Like you see like the person behind the counter kind of like eyeing you weird. Like, do you really have the, it's such there's so much stigma and just like, I don't know, drama and stuff kind of associated with that whole world, which is unfortunate because I do think it's helpful for the right person that has the right dose and everything else. But it's kind of a complicated world, all of that, which is partly why in the book that I wrote, I kind of just avoided that topic because it's such a divisive and like touch point. Like I was like, I don't really have the knowledge there anyway. So I'm just going to kind of like sidestep that topic. But yeah.
Well, I brought you right into it. No, yeah, for me, my audience probably knows this by now, but I am highly distrustful of the pharmaceutical industry based on it started with actual experiences of my own, how my dad was treated when he had cancer, my whole experience being way overprescribed Adderall for 10 years, having to get off of it. Then you just see documentaries like Dope Sick on Hulu and like The Bleeding Edge. Like there's just so much corruption in that industry. So again, sure, I hear Mel Robbins takes ADHD medication and I really respect her. And also, for some reason, every single person in my life that has taken it has had a complete opposite thing. Like it is a prescription methamphetamine. So just know that going in. But we'll move on to the other topics that are in the book. So you talked about the 4 C's of motivation framework. And I love this because, like you said, there's been so many times where I'm like, okay, how do I hack my motivation? And I'm reading a Boring Brain book and I'll try it and it kind of works at first, but then I end up realizing it's actually more in that novelty. It's this new system for me. And then I'm like, okay, why do I not care about this little reward in my to-do list app? I don't want a badge, like make me feel something. Give me a nook, and so one of those highly encouraged ways of managing your tasks, though, is a book that my husband read called Eat the Frog. And it's all about doing the most, like your biggest task first, the most important, most difficult task first. And so for him, he like gets up and does his cold shower first thing in the morning. And I'm like, no, I feel like once I'm done with that, I'd be like tapped out for the day.
Right.
What have you found is a better way for people with an ADHD brain to handle their first tasks?
Yeah, so that I'd heard this advice as well, that like if you've got to eat a frog, eat it first thing in the morning. Like take care of that difficult task and get it out of the way, because then everything else will be a lot easier the rest of your day. And I think for me, the biggest problem with this advice is it totally makes sense. Like I hear it and I'm like, the logic totally sounds right. I'm like, yeah, that would make everything else feel easier. But the problem is when I try to do that, I just stare at the frog for like 8 hours and never do anything else. Like nothing gets done instead. And I think part of it is just like those boring kind of mundane tasks are so hard. It's so hard to like cold start and like take on something like that when you have ADHD. Like I feel like our brain, there's so much about like building up energy and momentum so that we can like plow through. Like once we're kind of moving and in motion, we can take on something like that. So I usually suggest people instead eat the ice cream. Like find the thing that does excite you to kind of help get yourself moving, get building up that kind of momentum. I think I talk about in the book as like it's sort of like a train. Like at the beginning of the day, you're not moving at all. There's no momentum. So by eating the ice cream and finding those tasks that are like fun or that like excite or challenge your brain, whatever it is, taking those on can kind of like build up that speed. So then later in the day, when you're like kind of in motion, you can kind of it's like inertia. Like you keep that motion going, and then you can take on that difficult task of eating the frog or whatever it is. So that's definitely my sort of approach. Like build up that energy, build up that, because it's again like with the hyper focus thing. Like a lot of times once we get going, then it's easy to just like keep going. You're just kind of like, again, it's the inertia that's just like pushing you forward because you kind of have all this positive movement energy. It's almost like it's really hard to go do something in the kitchen when you're sitting on the couch. But the second you stand up, it's a lot easier to take the rest of the steps over to the kitchen. But it's just that initial movement that is really hard. So don't make that initial movement eating a frog. Like try to make that something easy to get you going.
I am so glad you said that. And I don't even know if this was one of the actual strategies in the book, but there are times where when I do have a difficult task that I'm sitting there and I'll actually be having a dialogue in my head where I'm like, why does it feel like I literally cannot get up? Like there's a huge weight on my entire body and I can't get up if I wanted to. Like this procrastination is taking over my entire body. And so it kind of brings me to another one of your strategies, making a to-do list over a to-do list. And the amount of times I will let you go into more detail on what that even means, but the amount of times that I've done a couple of things, but I still have a kind of a bigger thing to do. And I'm like, okay, I need to sit down and write down what I've already done. And it's dumb stuff. Like, it's like, okay, I checked out on Thrive Market with my newest grocery order. It wasn't the most important thing at all today. I put the clothes on the floor into the hamper, but I like need to check them off because it's my little dopamine hits. And then I can start thinking about the next thing. And I'm going to combine a couple of your strategies, but then like breaking it down to where I can't have this big giant task on my list. I need to like have open up document or something like that, or I'll open up when I know. One thing that's been hugely helpful is actually planning my day the night before so that I don't get bogged down by my emotion of it. And so I'll be like, okay, I've got these things to do, and I'll just open up like the documents or whatever on my screen. So I know I just sort of touched on like 3 different strategies, but I'm going to let you go into more detail on them.
Yeah. So first off, you mentioned like the to-do list, and I love this. Again, it's very similar to kind of the big frog, eating the frog issue, where it's so easy to like feel like you haven't done anything, and then when you haven't done anything, it's hard to get started. So the idea of like a to-do list is you write down some of the things that you've done, and like you said, they might be simple things like I think you said like finishing a grocery order, or like putting some clothes in the hamper, or like maybe it's even just like made coffee, went, like for me, I work in a home office. So like got dressed and, moved to my home office. Sometimes it's as simple as that. Other times, maybe you got a lot done and it just takes like sitting down and thinking about it for a moment. But then you put these on the list and you check them off. Like they're already done, but you physically write them down on the list and then check them off. And then you look at your list and you're like, I'm halfway done. Like I'm moving through this list already. And it becomes a lot more of like, there's that positive kind of association that happens. Like, oh, I'm already checking stuff off here. This feels good. I want to keep doing it so I can keep checking it off. because look, I've already filled out like 2/3 of the list or whatever it is. And so I love the idea of doing like the to-do list. There's just something so satisfying about checking something off a list. And so I do that one a lot. I'm trying to remember what the other ones you kind of touched on were.
A lot. Let's just let our ADD flow and let's go on to the next one.
Awesome. Perfect.
Embrace the pivot, you know?
Yeah, I will say like one thing that I love that I've really kind of talked about in the book was like a lot of these strategies are totally meant to be like mixed up. Try this, try that, like switch them out. I really think like I'm into different sports, and one analogy that really makes sense for me is like in football they have like their call list, like their playbook. They have tons of plays in there. They don't have like two plays that they just keep trying over and over and over again. Like they try a play, and if it works, awesome. They might use that one again. If it doesn't, they change it up. They try a whole, like flip to a whole new page in the playbook and try out something new. And I think of that with like all of my strategies. Like maybe the to-do list is like working like magic for you. And then one day you're like, this just isn't doing it for me. Then throw it away. Like that strategy isn't on the table for today. And that's totally fine. Part of it, like kind of like you said, novelty is so important that is part of the strategy. Like sometimes the strategy is effective just because it's novel, and that's totally fine. Like I don't feel bad about that anymore. Like if this is working for me just because it's like I downloaded a new app on my phone, cool, use that while it works. And then when it doesn't, yeah, you mentioned like embrace the pivot. Like I really try to encourage, and I personally really try to live like, don't feel bad about abandoning some old to-do system and moving to something new. Like just move forward with that, and sort of like it's just sort of like accepting your brain for what it is. Like my brain like really loves novelty, and so it's really going to love some strategies for a while. And when it doesn't work anymore, I don't feel bad about it anymore. Like it's like, cool, my brain is onto something new. Let's find the new fun thing and honestly, that means finding a new strategy is going to be more novelty. So that's kind of exciting a little bit. Like, what else am I going to try? And so that's really something I talk about in the book, and I really try to embrace that, like just not feeling bad, because I spent too much of my life feeling bad whenever some productivity tip didn't work for me, or when I had something that was working and then it stopped working. And it's like, don't feel bad about it. Just try the next thing. Just move on. Like, say, it's like, thank you strategy for working for a little bit. And then maybe I'll come back to you in 6 months. Who knows? And for now, I'm going to move on. And that's totally, A-okay.
I just moved back to a to-do list app that I haven't used in like 7 years. And all of a sudden I'm like, this is the best one. Why have I been wasting my time on these other ones? But there was a reason that I can't remember that I abandoned it, but now I'm loving it. But there was this story that somebody told me once that has stuck with me. And I can't remember who it was that even told me this, but he was telling me how his mom got a Fitbit, and his mom said, or he said to his mom, those things are only proven to really be effective or be motivating for people for like 3 months. And she's like, perfect. I've got my next 3 months covered, and then I can find something after that. And I think about that all the time, because that's exactly how I need to work. And I will say it's easier now because I've had success in my life, and I love my ADHD brain. There's a lot of downsides to it, but there's a lot of downsides to boring brains as well. And the amount of things that I can get myself excited for, and like projects that I've started and now have learned to work with my brain to complete, at least to some level. And I recommend outsourcing too, once you can afford it. It's like, okay, well, now I can. And so I know that this part of the project is going to be most exciting, and this part's going to kind of peter me out. So let me have some freelancers lined up so I can have those tasks be sent off to them. And then that extra motivates me, because then all of a sudden I like shoot things off on Upwork or something like that. Or Indeed, and then I go to sleep and come back, and a couple days later, I've forgotten about that task. I'm working on something else, and then it comes back to me, and I'm like, oh, this is all done. I can start doing the next phase of this. It's actually amazing.
That is so awesome. I love that. Yeah, I mean that's something I've been recently just sort of looking into, because right now I haven't done any of that outsourcing, and it's something I'm like I should be doing that. Like I should look into hiring kind of like a VA or an editor or things like that, because I've done projects where I was doing a podcast before, which is like it's paused right now, but I'm thinking about bringing it back. But when I bring it back, I was doing all the editing before, and I was like, that cannot work. So hiring an editor, yeah, like once you're able to kind of make that work, I think that's so awesome. I was actually I was teaching a course a while back, and one of the people attending the course kind of like half joking said like, if everyone with ADHD had like a full-time assistant, we'd all be millionaires, because we have all these great ideas. And what happens is there's just those little difficulties in implementation, those little like boring things that are little catches. But I just like you said, like I love my brain. I would not want to. I would like if there was a pill that took away ADHD, I would not take that. Like I love the way my brain works. Like it's so much of who I am. And yeah, there's difficulties, particularly because we live in a boring brain world. But I love the pros, and so I'm just kind of a student of my brain, just always trying to learn how can I make my brain, which I love, work in the world that, or in this job or this situation. Like, what can I do to, again, it's like, call back to like the figuring out how to like cheat classes by not actually cheating, but give me the work up front, because that's going to work for me. Just like figuring out those little hacks, so that we can just sort of like embrace what is working really great with our brain, which is a lot of stuff when you can look past those like little gotchas that kind of get you at the beginning.
That brings me to another one of your strategies on externalizing the problem. And I will tell you that getting the details out of your head, I used to do this in a couple of different ways. Yes, writing down the tasks in general, breaking it up was helpful, because not only does it let me see what there is coming up, but it forces me to get it out of my head. And I don't even realize it's simpler than I'm making it out to be. This whole heavy weight, it feels like a weighted blanket on the couch, can't get up. But if I just write down, well, what are the first few tasks? And maybe it seems so overwhelming, but the first task is research for 15 minutes or something like that. And then all of a sudden I'm finding out different answers. But also I use an app called Otter where you can speak and it transcribes it. But now that we're living in an AI world, I have a new formula of kind of like, I'll just speak to Otter and then I copy and paste the transcription into ChatGPT and I'm like, write this in bullet points, and all of a sudden it's like this. You don't even need the VA anymore. Sometimes you don't even need to outsource things. Sometimes I'll just have a conversation with ChatGPT like it's my coach, just to get different insights into how I should organize my brain. Like, this is what I'm thinking. And if I can speak it, it's even better, because then it's not this overwhelming thing that I am like, well, I don't even have time to write it out, because that gets in the way of outsourcing quite a bit. I'm like, I could just do this task before I could explain it to somebody. But with ChatGPT's help, sometimes you don't need the VA. Sometimes they can at least help you formulate the Upwork job post or whatever it is. And so those things have been really helpful. And then also when it becomes affordable, I'm at the point where now I'm like, okay, I've done all that I can do with outsourcing. There's still something blocking me. Let me just have a coach. And so I like to hire coaches because they can kind of pull those things out of me. Like, what I'm hearing you say is this, and it's like, oh, why can't I hear myself saying that? Why?
Right.
How come when it's in my head, it seems like this impossible problem, but now that I just said 3 sentences, you're like, yeah, this is what's getting in your way.
Yeah, I think it's funny when I've worked with coaches before, and like you can like almost sense it happening, where you're like, they're not even saying anything, they're just like hanging out with me, and I'm verbalizing and like solving these problems, and they're just like presence is enough to get me to do that, because otherwise I wouldn't say it out loud. It would be in my head. And I think like when those words are in the head, they're all kind of jumbled and they feel like they're clear, but they aren't really clear. But then kind of like what you said at the beginning, like the externalizing the problem, like getting it out of my head and into the real world, even if it's just like speaking it like makes it real somehow. It forces you to structure it in a certain way. And then when you do that, I think like some of the maybe a problem with the idea, or like, oh, why am I doing it like this? Now that I say that thing out loud, like that sounds ridiculous that that's something I keep doing and expecting it to work. I think I find that all the time, which is why, like, again, like you said, like I've found tools. There's a tool called Audio Pen, which is really similar to, it does like Otter and ChatGPT sort of combined. So it's like one tool where you can speak it and then it'll do those bullet points that you're talking about. So that's a really great tool. And I found that to be, super helpful, because sometimes like I don't even know what I think about an idea. I just know I have a lot of thoughts swirling around in my head about it. And so if I speak it out loud and then sort of can see those bullet points, I've found that to be a really, really useful tool, because like what I would do instead is like talk to my wife about like all these random ideas, and she's like, I don't even know what you're talking about sometimes, because it's just like, so like I know that I have all these like really extreme thoughts and ideas, and I know there's something exciting in there, but I can't quite word it in the way. And so I've definitely found like some of these AI tools to be really helpful for sort of like finding like those good details kind of within there, and helping me to clarify what I'm thinking about something and what I'm trying to say. Those tools I think are really cool and really interesting. I've even taken like like we talked about the 4 C's of motivation. I've taken those, told ChatGPT what it is, and then told it about a task I'm struggling with, and had it like generate strategies using my own like framework for how to tackle problems, which has been it's pretty crazy that you can do that. And it's been like it's really good. Like it works really well for stuff like that.
There's another tool called Cast Magic, and it was originally made for podcasts. So like after we're done recording this, Zapier is going to automatically send the recording to Cast Magic. And then they have these prompts that auto populate. So it's like potential titles. Here's the bio. Here's the questions that you ask. It's amazing. And they are expanding. So right now it's just a beta app that they have, but now I have an iPhone app, and they do the same thing that Otter does. And you can create your own prompts. So you can have your own prompt that automatically will break it into the 4 C's for any time without even having to do anything. And so you can create multiple ones where it's like, okay, figure out this. Now figure out my first 3 steps. Now figure out this. And then it'll just be a page of all of the things that you prompted. So yes, I am loving the AI world because it creates this structure for me, which brings me to another thing that you talk about, how we kind of have a weird relationship with structure. Like I know I find freedom in structure, and also I will resist it so hardcore. And so what have you found that balance? Like what works and what doesn't? Or is it just sort of depending on your mood?
Yeah, I mean, first off, Cast Magic. That sounds like magic. I just wrote it down. I'm going to check that out as soon as we're done with the recording here. But yeah, oh man, I hate structure, but I know it works for me. It's so annoying. Just sort of the same thing like with deadlines. Like I hate deadlines. I hate knowing that there's a deadline for something, but I also know that that deadline is going to be effective for me. I don't think there is like at least I haven't found any sort of like magic formula that really helps me know where that line is. It really is sort of driven by mood, or driven sort of by trial and error, where it's like I add structure when I can feel things going like off the rails a little bit. It's like this, like I need to lay down some track, or whatever the metaphor is. Like I need to add some structure because this is like I'm flailing a little bit here, and like this is not working out. And then I also know that inevitably I'm going to like rebel against that structure, because I like, you put me in a box, first thing I'm going to do is figure out how to break out of that box. And so I do think it's sort of like like a give and take, a push and pull with that kind of structure. I'm always wanting to push it away, but then like there's that sensible part of me that's like, if we don't add this, this is never going to get done, or this is never going to go right. And I think also part of it just has to do with like experience of having seen structure work for me. And so there's like the logical part of my brain where it's like, I know this will help, like, because I've seen it, even though there's that like rebellious part of my soul that's like, oh, I don't want that structure. I can point to examples in my life where I know that structure has helped. Or when like building a project, like if I'm working on like an app that like I do some like development stuff, if I'm working on an app and I don't like set like like ship early, like I'm going to work on it for like 7 years and never finish it. Or like my book is a great example. Like I could have worked on that book for 10 years. if I hadn't set like deadlines, and if I hadn't set like, I don't want it to be more than this many words, and like those sorts of things to really help rein it in. But, I just said that and I broke past my word limit because I got there and I was like, oh, let's do it just a little bit more. And so it's so much of that kind of back and forth and just sort of finding where that kind of fuzzy line is, where structure can exist and be helpful without being too constraining.
The structure that has hands down been the most helpful is planning at least my most important tasks the night before. And so I'll just like drag them into today. I told you I went back to a to-do list app that I'm like, well, where's this been for years that I abandoned years ago? Things I've been using Todoist, but what it lacks is, and this is something that Things has, and so did OmniFocus, but then OmniFocus was a little bit too robust to where I'd get lost in trying to over organize it all.
Oh, same. Like I spent hours and hours trying to build the perfect structure in OmniFocus, and it'll let you, but it's like it's just way too overwhelming. There's so much power there that it just like it becomes overwhelming eventually.
I know I had like Apple scripts going. I got all nerdy about it. And with things, but the thing I need is not just a deadline. I need a start date as well. And so I need it to be pushing something forward because some things, the deadline's tomorrow, but I can start it tomorrow. Like I can only do it tomorrow, And so I don't want it coming up like within the 3 days. And then there's other things that I'm like, it's due in 4 weeks, but I know I need to start now or else I'm going to be super stressed out. And so I need it to be showing up in today already. And then you can also just star things or drag it to today. It makes it very easy to just move things into today without having to over organize. So that's what I'm using right now. But the planning the night before or having the files open, like I said, kind of preparing my workspace works. I do rebel against it. And so I kind of go in waves of that. But one thing I've noticed is you mentioned it where you now have enough evidence that something works for you. So you've got a logical brain side. I've made it a habit to really dwell on the positive effects of something. So an example is meditation. For a long time, meditation was like hell for my ADD brain.
Right.
And then I started the more I did it, the better I got at it, first of all. It started to feel differently than it did in the beginning. But I've now tied meditation with euphoria. Like I actually get really excited to do it. And also, first thing in the morning, it's difficult to get out of bed sometimes if you're tired. But if you're just rolling off the bed into meditation, it actually makes it very easy. You're like, I'm almost asleep here. And I'm still in an alpha state of mind. So I can actually like vision things. But I've also noticed like the difference of waking up first and going on social media. My brain will be so scattered all day long versus starting it with even just 10 minutes, but I like to do 20 minutes of meditation. Feels like it's extending sleep. I've tied it to that feeling of euphoria. And it's just like my brain is just a little bit quieter all day long. Like it really does affect it.
That is so cool. That like meditation is something I've heard time and time again from so many people, like the benefits of it. And I haven't, kind of like what you said, I think I'm a little bit past that, like my brain rebelling against it. And I just need to give it like a good, like real, like effort again to try it. I have done, it's like not quite meditation, but I've done like, sometimes I'll do walks and I find that to be like really like, leave the podcast at home and just like walk around, walk around. I live near a school, so I'll just like walk around the track like 3 or 4 times and just sort of like ponder and sort of think. And like that, I find that to be really helpful. But it's one of those things that I'm like, I know I hate to use the word should, because like that's usually kind of a negative word, but I could really dive into meditation. I've heard a lot of people similar to what you said, that it's like almost become like they can't imagine not doing it because it seems to affect like so much more of like the rest of the day. And so that's on my short list of things I really need to give like some time and effort towards.
I have a trick for you because I will tell you how meditation finally became something that I loved. And I'm going to give you two things. One where you don't have to buy a device, one where you do. There's this thing called the Muse headband, and it actually goes around your head. And I have mixed feelings about it because I, on one hand, love it. On the other hand, I'm this holistic person that thinks about EMFs. So I used it for a period of time, and I don't always use it anymore, but it has an app and it shows you when your brain is distracted. And so it's all about coming back to a mantra, which is so important for people with ADHD because you're training your brain to focus and come back to something, and it makes real changes in your brain. And so being able to see, and it kind of rewards you with like this little bird chirping sound when you've actually reached that state. So the goal is to get into the bird chirping the whole time. And it was like this dopamine hit for me. I'm like, yes, I'm doing it right. It was almost like competition. And so that changed my relationship completely with meditation. But now even I meditated for 300 days straight, like at least once a day, but often twice a day, all last year. And then I had a baby and I was a little bit more distracted. And so I sort of lost it for a little bit. And the way I brought myself back to it was I knew I needed something that made it like a goal or something attainable again, rather than just sitting in stillness. And so I got really into the Silva mind control method. And so there's a book you can get, Silva Ultra Mind. It's actually awesome because you can listen to, I got the audiobook. You can listen to a chapter, and then the next chapter is a meditation that you can do. And it's all about, there's all of these basically like superpowers you gain from it. It's pretty powerful. And so maybe if you had that more of a focus where you knew you were gaining something from it, and either you can track it or you can just sort of feel it and go along with this book, that might help you actually make the practice sustainable.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think, so you mentioned before the idea of the Fitbit that like helped them for, 4 months or whatever it was. I am totally the kind of person that does that. Like it's sort of like retail therapy, but it's more like retail therapy with like a purpose, where I will buy. So like I bought a ring that tracks my sleep because I was trying to get better about sleep habits. And I knew that like, this is going to be this novel little device that's, oh, you've got the same ring. Nice. The Aura ring.
Also, the reason that kind of got me back on meditation when I was like, oh man, I was so good all last year. They introduced the new stress test, and I looked at my stress levels the first 2 days it was launched, and I was like, that is not good. And it said, take a couple minutes to yourself. And so I meditated for 5 minutes, and then the next morning I started meditating every day again. I am not kidding you when I say it decreased my stress levels by 80% just doing a morning meditation.
Yeah,
so if you
I
need
love
it more.
I'm a big fan of being able to see all those little like body metric stats or whatever. So like the Aura ring, I have like the Apple Watch 2, which tracks a bunch of stuff. And like it's fascinating being able to see like in real time kind of those changes. It actually reminds me, I have 3 kids. My youngest son earlier this year was diagnosed with diabetes. And so through that, which is like, that's a whole world. We don't have to get into that all. That's been a journey. But now because he has that, we're tracking like his blood glucose levels all the time. And it's been really fascinating seeing any kind of food and how much that number just like some food, it'll be like immediately spikes, and other ones it'll take like, oh, this one actually takes, like you start to learn like, oh, this affects it this way and this affects it that way. And it's just like constantly learning those differences. And that's what I kind of love about all the, like the Aura ring, like learning those things like, oh man, yeah, I had coffee late at night and I went to bed a little bit late, and I can see like these numbers, like, and maybe the numbers aren't like exact or anything, but it gives you can see like these trends of like, oh, this is clearly making some sort of trackable difference. And so that kind of excites me. Like that does feel like the sort of thing that could get me to like give like meditation that real try of being able to see those changes. Because I've never heard anyone that's like, yeah, I really did like meditation for like 100 days or whatever it is, and it did nothing. Like those stories aren't really out there. So it's all about just like whatever I can get to motivate myself to do it so that I can see those effects. And then it becomes part of that. Again, the logical part of my brain sees like, hey, remember we saw that thing. We know it makes a difference. And that kind of help motivate me to make those, positive choices going forward.
And Actually, I can get you a discount. Go to mindlove.com/muse and it'll just take you right there. And I think you get like 20% off. So check that out. But it brings me to another one of your strategies around making chores or making things novel. I'd like to know some of the other ways that you make things that you might not be super excited to do have that little novelty effect.
Yeah, so like an example I use in the book, just because it's such like a common mundane chore, is doing the dishes. And I just hate doing the dishes. It's just so monotonous, and it's something you have to do all the time. Like it's a very common chore that you have to get done. But I find that, and it sounds, I mean, almost sounds childish, like saying these things that make it novel. But for me, it's worked for my brain. So, like one example, a lot of times, if I have to empty the dishwasher, rather than like grabbing items, putting them in the cupboards or whatever, I will move them to the table and sort of stack them. So I'll stack the bowls, all the clean bowls on the table, and then I'll stack like the cups or whatever it is, and then move it from there to where they go in the cupboards. And that I feel like it sounds like silly telling people that I do that, because for my wife with, the quote unquote boring brain, for her, she's like, what do you do? You're adding extra work. Like, why would you do that? But it makes it a little bit more interesting for my brain. And another way you can do it is like, well, I'm going to start by grabbing everything that's silver. So like the silverware first, and then I'm going to grab anything that's blue. So like, oh, the blue bowls, the blue cups, like whatever those things are. And you could even do like alphabetically, like A, is there anything that starts with A? No. B, bowls. Okay, I'll put the bowls away first, and kind of moving down. And it's these little things. It's like, that's not going to work every night, but that might work tonight. Like it might work this time to make it just a little bit more interesting. And another thing I do a ton, I listen to lots of podcasts and audiobooks too. And so my AirPods are pretty much always in my ear, especially if I'm doing any sort of chore. Like if I have to take out the trash, I know it only takes like a minute or two. I'm still putting in the AirPods because I want to associate doing that task with getting to listen to my favorite podcast. So it becomes like the chore is almost just like the busy work that I'm kind of doing in the background while I'm listening to something I want to be doing, that I want to be listening to. And so those are a few ways that I really try to add that novelty, that kind of almost creativity to those boring tasks like doing the dishes.
I just said to my husband recently, I'm like, I need my iPad and I need to put on like Gaia TV or an audiobook or something that'll keep me in the kitchen, because I would like take out the meat and then I just like go into the other room. And he's like, the meat's sitting out. Can I put it back in the fridge? And I was like, don't put it back in the fridge. That's adding more friction to my next task. And he's like, it's been sitting out for 14 minutes. And I'm like, okay. And so, but I will challenge you to start high dosing vitamin C to mitigate some of those EMF things. I got really into air tube headphones because it's like the best for your brain. And I was going down the EMF rabbit hole, one of my hyper focusing binges. and so then I freaked myself out, only had air tubes, but gosh, not accidentally hitting the cord and dropping your phone down on the floor I was just so excited when AirPods came out. And then of course I was going to learn that they were possibly frying my brain. But then I read all these studies about how high dosing vitamin C like almost completely mitigates some of those harms. So just a little tip for you guys out there that love your AirPods, because I will still wear mine now that I've learned that.
Nice.
But another strategy that you talk about is letting things go. And this is another thing. I swear that I was going through your book and I was like, was he just eavesdropping on like 19 of my conversations in the last 4 days and writing them in chapters? Feels like a joke. And one of those was, I was like, I feel like the older I get, the harder of a time I'm having letting things go, even though I do so much work around stuff like that. And my husband's like, that's what happens to old people. That's why so many old people are either super zen or super cranky. And I was like, all right, I need to do even more. So what is your strategy of letting things go?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like part of it just comes with time. Like you just sort of like experience things, and then you realizing like I'm not winning here by holding on to these things. Like that is not like enriching my life. It's not helping me. It's really just like holding me back. And so, yeah, letting things go, kind of moving on. I feel like it's just so important to like not weigh yourself down with that, because it's so like
But what if it's rejection?
Well, rejection is like that's a whole another problem with ADHD. If you
I
want to get
didn't know
into
that
that,
until your book. And so I'm actually really fascinated because those are the things I have a hard time letting go. Like I still dwell over. For some reason, I expect that everyone I've ever been friends with, I should at least have them in my life in a friendly way. And that is not the case. And some of them I actually have no idea why. And so I'll dream about it to this day. I haven't talked to that person in 19 years. So
Mm.
tell me about rejection and ADHD.
Yeah, so there's this thing with ADHD called rejection sensitivity. I didn't actually know about it at first either. And when I first heard about it, it was like a light bulb, like, oh, this makes so much sense. And Dr. William Dodson, again, he's like one of the leading people in the ADHD world. I think I mentioned him already because he kind of pushed the interest-based nervous system idea. So he's kind of coined this idea, rejection sensitive dysphoria, which isn't like an official term, but it describes the idea of like when because we have kind of emotional dysregulation, and I'm not a neuroscientist, but because the way neurochemicals kind of work for people with ADHD differently, the like we feel our emotional dysregulation, like our regulation is all sort of like out of whack. And so a lot of times we'll experience things really extremely. And that's like both like maybe someone will give us good news and we'll be like overjoyed and like, wow, that's amazing. And then people will be like, whoa, like calm it down a little bit. It's not that big of a deal. And then the opposite, like we'll like some of us will like really quickly move to tears, like just like on a dime. Or for me, it was anger, like really quickly, something like I would feel rejection or like that withdrawing of love. And for me specifically, it often felt like betrayal. Like I'd be having an argument or, a heated discussion with my wife. And then she would say something and like with time, I could look back and see that it wasn't a big deal. But in the moment, it hit my brain in a way that felt like rejection. It felt like betrayal. And then like basically, I don't know what's happening in the brain, but it felt like all the chemicals were firing and it just felt like you just like betrayed me so deeply. And I like it felt like pain. It felt like someone just like stabbed me deep in the soul. And because of that, like especially when I was growing up, like my response when I felt that was to like blow up in anger because it felt justified. It didn't feel like I was overreacting. It felt like your offense was so deep and so massive that me responding big was appropriate. And so that's kind of like in my household too, growing up, like my brother and my dad and me were all sort of like that. And so that's kind of what I was used to. But like learning about the rejection sensitive dysphoria made me realize like, oh, I'm misunderstanding most of the time because like when I reflect on it and I think like, okay, does it make sense? Like if I evaluate my history with my wife to this point, does it make sense that she would betray me the way that I feel right now?
Absolutely.
And like logically, then I could take that logical part of my brain and say like, no, that doesn't make any sense. Like, why would the way I feel doesn't add up with what the reality likely is. And so like, but that doesn't take the pain away. Like the way I felt was like in that moment when she said that thing that offended me, I felt this like deep betrayal. But then like that part of my brain after I learned about rejection sensitive dysphoria, like it, I don't know, it clicked on just like this tiny little voice of like, hey, maybe this is that little thing you read about. And so in the moment, in one of these times when it happened, I like through gritted teeth basically said like, I think I'm experiencing that rejection sensitive dysphoria thing. Can we take a break and like come back to this later? And then, and she had, we had talked about it beforehand, the RSD. And so she's like, yep, we'll take a break. And then with that space, it was as if like the brain chemicals or whatever were able to kind of calm down. And then I could see and reevaluate and like, oh, that doesn't make any sense. Like that I totally took it the wrong way. It felt like this deep rejection of who I am. And it wasn't that at all. It was something that maybe wasn't that positive or whatever, but it was not a big deal. And so like evaluating my history with her was able to like recognize in my brain that it's not that big of a deal, giving it time. Like I've been doing some training on becoming an ADHD coach. And one of the things they talk about a lot is the power of the pause, where like so often when you have ADHD, you want to like have these snap responses to things. Like you feel things so intensely that you want to respond intensely, like immediately. And pausing, just like giving time for like the rest of our brain to like catch up with what's happening. A lot of times we'll realize that like, oh, my initial reaction that felt like the right thing to do actually probably isn't the right thing to do. And it just sort of gives you that extra clarity. Because a lot of times I don't feel like, back when I used to experience like angry outbursts or whatever a lot, like I never thought about doing the outburst. I responded. It was just like something would happen and then I would act. And then later I would think. And, it's the whole like, what is it? Fire, aim, shoot. I don't know. It's like reversing that order. It was like I would jump into the situation before I had any chance to think about, do I want to jump into this situation in this way? And so that's something that's super common for people with ADHD. And again, for me, it was primarily anger. So it was like big and out there. For other people, it might be like bursting into tears or like bottling up. And like that's how they respond to that rejection. But it's fairly universal, like most people with ADHD, where they just, that feeling of rejection. And I think part of it is because when you have ADHD, you've probably grown up hearing lots of negative messages. And so you're really sensitive to that idea of rejection. And so it's almost like, no, not you two rejecting me. Like, I don't want to experience that again. And so I have whatever it is for me, I have that strong emotional reaction to that rejection because it's so painful. But recognizing it again, like knowing that it's a thing, helps me to find the power of the pause, like helping to give breath, give space to that moment so that I can have a chance to reflect and not just respond.
I always love leaving listeners with a challenge for the week. And that pause is such a good one because whether or not you have ADHD, it's such a great tip of just one of my friends did Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's one of their things too, is like just pause before responding. And I was having a hard time, and she's like, I'm going to give you some AA tips over here. And it was all about the pause. And so it's so helpful because it allows you, whether it's your brain catching up or your brain slowing down to kind of meet the situation. I do that a lot where people are just like talking too slow. And I'm like, I can barely follow you because you're talking too slow. Can I 2X you like I do my podcast?
Totally.
But there's so much gold in your book. There's so many things that I feel like we could talk for hours just because I'm like, I feel so seen. And so for listeners that are really resonating and they want all of these other tips that we didn't even get to touch on, where's the best place for them to connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a website dedicated for the book, which is just extrafocusbook.com. And you can also get it at any, Amazon, any other book. If you don't want to do Amazon, that's fine. It's at most other bookstores as well. And then as far as like just following kind of the stuff I write about online, I have a newsletter, which is extrafocus.com. So it's kind of confusing. The newsletter and the book have the same name. And then I'm just ADHD Jesse, Jesse, on all the social media platforms, or most of them anyway.
All the links for this episode are at mindlove.com/332. Your challenge for this week is to pick just one of these many, many tips that we talked about and try to apply it. If you can't remember any of them, try this instead. Become aware of the most challenging aspects of your ADHD. Is it just getting started with things? Is it maintaining motivation? And then with that in mind, go back and listen to this episode and pick up tricks just for that. I know it sounds tedious. If you're anything like me, you don't like listening to things a second time. My cousin's always like, oh, I watched Elf for the 300th time. And I'm like, if I've seen a movie, I want nothing to do with it ever again. I need the new and novel and exciting all the time. But just this once, challenge yourself, because I promise you, it's with this awareness and learning how to work with your unique strengths and perceived weaknesses, and then actually noticing when something works, that's when it starts to motivate you to do this more and more and really optimize your life based on your needs. So become aware. I notice this when I'm like, oh my God, my brain hurts. I feel so distracted. And just take note. What's going on at this moment? What are you focusing on? For me, a lot of times what really triggers my ADHD is clutter, which is funny because then my ADHD actually creates clutter as well. It's very difficult to like clean as I go. And so I will notice all of a sudden I've got all this stuff to do, and then all of a sudden I'm noticing all the things that need to be done, including everything being everywhere. And that's when my brain feels like it hurts. And so notice the conditions of that. What led to that? Take note of the harder times, of the harder moments, what's going on around it, and then listen to this episode again and see which ones you can take. If you want just a little recap on some of my favorites, I like the eat the ice cream first, getting some of the easy tasks done right away instead of eat the frog, which is what my husband does. And again, mine's all about novelty, so it depends on when you get me. Sometimes I'm eating that frog and sometimes I'm eating the ice cream. But just know that each one is its own method. And when we can realize that, it's easier to be easy on ourselves. Also embracing the pivot. So knowing that you'll eventually get bored with the system. This can also be seen as a gift. Externalizing the problems, get things out of your head, just write it down. You don't need to have a strategy or a complete system every single time, just write it down. Oh, or making chores novel. I used to only fold laundry while watching The Bachelor. Now I'm in a little bit more of a productive phase. And so I listen to an audiobook or watch some sort of webinar while I am folding, but it keeps me stuck in one spot, less likely to just wander off. So let me know how it goes. Reach out to me on Instagram at mindlovemelissa, or you can find Jessie at ADHD Jessie. If you are not following me on Instagram, please do so. It's been a whole new world over there recently. I've got reels, I've got posts, there's all sorts of things going on that you're missing out on. So meet me at mindlovemelissa. You can find all of my amazing sponsors and their really exciting discount codes at mindlove.com/sponsors. Don't forget, I vet all of these. They are companies that I really like. I turn down a lot of potential sponsors. So these are great ones that I personally use and love. If you have an ADHD friend or family member that would love this episode, please share it with them. Tap the little share button, or you could just share on Instagram, take a screenshot, tag me, mindlovemelissa, and mindlove podcast. And that's all for today. So thanks for giving your ADHD mind a little love today, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning into Your Higher Frequency with Mind Love. Head to mindlove.com for a free gift to keep your vibes up until next week.
E-commerce business owners know the best way to run a successful business is to keep their customers happy. You build trust with your customers one package at a time. That's why smart retailers use ShipStation. ShipStation helps you run the smoothest order fulfillment process possible and cut costs, not corners. ShipStation streamlines all your orders from everywhere you sell into one easy-to-use dashboard, prints shipping labels, manages returns, and tracks inventory. You can even automate repetitive tasks so your team makes fewer errors. Plus, they get you the lowest possible carrier rates. You'll save up to 88% off UPS, USPS, and DHL Express, and up to 90% off FedEx rates. When shoppers choose to buy your products, turn them into loyal customers with cheaper, faster, and better shipping. Go to shipstation.com/program to sign up for your free trial. There's no credit card or contract required, and you can cancel anytime. That's shipstation.com/program.